Aloha. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here on Maui once again for the Energy Conference. Microgrids, distributed energy resources, solar plus energy storage. These are critical resources to build resilience for Hawaii. This is resilience that provides backup power. It's resilience that provides affordable electricity rates and reliability for people. So it's more than just response to disaster. It's also about everyday resilience. I'm delighted to be joined here today by 4 innovators, experts, leaders in microgrids, distributed energy resources, and resilience. We're joined here by Ferdinand Ramos, Associate Commissioner of the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau. Ferdinand has a degree in engineering from Georgia Tech, and he's been leading the charge for distributed energy resources and VPPs in Puerto Rico for the last few years, a success story. Ali Andrews is the co-founder and CEO of Shake Energy Collective. Many of you probably know her. She has been working with communities from the community up to build the resources that they need to protect themselves and build resilience and survive. Dr. Russ Garcia runs the higher education, and state government segment for Johnson Controls, a huge business. His projects have brought significant savings and benefit to the people of Maui, people of Hawaii, and places across the continent. We're so lucky to have him here. And then Andrew MacCalla. Andrew MacCalla is the CEO and co-founder of Collective Energia. They are an energy company dedicated to developing resilience infrastructure, distributed energy resources on community health centers, and he'll go into why that's such a special thing. So starting with you, Ferdinand, please introduce yourself and give us your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. Do you guys hear me well? Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor and a privilege to be here in Maui for this conference. Actually, I went to school in Georgia Tech. I have a degree in electrical engineering, so it was a good background for the role that I got in the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau. But Puerto Rico's situation is unique. We have a bankrupt public utility. It's been in bankruptcy since 2017, and although people expect this bankruptcy to be over soon, it doesn't seem like it's going to be ending this year. In 2017, months after having declared the bankruptcy of the utility, Puerto Rico was pummeled by 2 hurricanes 2 weeks apart, like most of you know, Irma and Maria. Maria being by far the worst of these 2 hurricanes. Although an overwhelming majority of Puerto Ricans consider the hurricanes a traumatizing experience, me personally, or some people on the island spent an entire year without power. I live in Caguas. It's an urban city or an urban part of Puerto Rico, and I spent two months without power. So oftentimes I refer to this entire ordeal as a blessing in disguise. And you may ask why would you say that? So it's such a horrible thing, a blessing. Well, let me explain. As a public utility, PREPA, the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, is covered under the FEMA statutes. So the damage to the grid in those 2 hurricanes was estimated to be approximately $12 billion, and with the possibility of $4 billion additional for mitigation measures. So a bankrupt utility, not able to go to the bonds market for investments, the FEMA funds became the one opportunity to rebuild the portions of the grid without necessarily increasing the rates. That's essentially the silver lining of the hurricanes. Another effect of these hurricanes, for better or worse, were drastic changes in public policy in Puerto Rico. So these changes were mainly focused on renewable energy as a primary means to achieve resiliency and be able to deal with similar catastrophes in the future. In 2018, Puerto Rico became the first jurisdiction to have regulation on microgrid development. That was actually before I joined the Bureau. They had just issued that regulation. In 2019, a statute was passed in Puerto Rico setting 100% RPS for 2050, similar to Hawaii, I believe. I think Hawaii was a couple years before. And also, it made the interconnection of distributed generation below 25 kW an automatic interconnection. And if there's utility people here, and when you hear that, it's scary. You know, it's cost quite a bit of issues in Puerto Rico, to say the least. Essentially, installers inform the utility once the system is installed, and the utility by law, in 30 days, they have to set the net metering rate on their bill. Subsequently, the utility does the necessary studies and determines if there's any need for upgrades to the system. The problem is there's so many people interconnecting, it's difficult for the utility to pinpoint who's paying for the upgrades, or what system caused these necessary upgrades. As of today, we have 190,000 systems interconnected under net metering arrangements, and most of them have batteries, which creates a massive BPP potential, like you were referring to. The systems are being interconnected at a rate of 2,000 to 3,000 a month, consistently for a couple of years now. And they represent a total capacity of approximately 1.5 gigawatts of capacity. This is almost 5.5 times the online capacity that Puerto Rico has of utility scale renewables. And it's almost half of the system's peak load. At noon, the apparent load, or the visible load of the utility sees in the system dips to below 1,900 megawatts. So this is creating an evening ramp of upwards of a gigawatt that we're seeing already. This is creating an evening ramp, like I said, of upwards of a gigawatt. And unfortunately, the legacy fossil generation systems wasn't designed for that. So it's causing a lot of stress on the fossil fuel it's still needed in Puerto Rico. This is a big issue, but luckily we have, within the next couple of months, we have several hundred megawatts of renewable energy solar paired with batteries for the most part. We have utility scale projects that don't have batteries, but most of them have either bid with batteries or are adding batteries now afterwards. And we're all hoping that these batteries, once online, will serve to stabilize the system. Now, regarding resiliency, when I hear the word resiliency, the first thing that comes to mind as a regulator is how much is this going to cost? And the second thing is who and how are we going to pay for this? I remember years ago when the word resiliency became sexy, and it was all about, the conversations were all about defining resiliency and the types of resiliency. Not so much was talked about the incremental costs of it. When it comes to utility service costs, modifying transmission, distribution, infrastructure to make it more resilient to hurricanes or any other catastrophe, they're usually astronomical and seldomly practical. In contrast, achieving resiliency in terms of large-scale generation is happening organically in Puerto Rico and here also with the shift to renewable energy and batteries, which is lowering the dependency on fossil fuels, especially on islands that import 100% of their fuel. At this moment in time, with the technology that we have available, the most reasonable and affordable way to become resilient is installing behind-the-meter batteries and to create personal microgrids. The underlying issue predominantly is that people that need the most resiliency are the people that have the hardest time paying for it. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Ferdinand. Great perspective on another island that faces similar challenges. They rhyme. Ali, what can you say to us on this subject?
Thanks, Rocky. I think where I'll start is echoing what Ferdinand just said about resilience being sexy. I think that maybe I'll back up a little bit. My work and our company's work at Shake Energy Collaborative, we are really interested in community-designed and community-owned renewable energy assets. And so half of our work is getting to collaborate, to work with, to host workshops with communities to understand what they like about energy, what they want to know, what they want to design, how they want energy infrastructure to serve them. And then the other half of our work is helping to implement those ideas for community ownership. So we act as a development services provider to help support a nonprofit or cooperative to own the assets that were just designed in a series of workshops. And resilience being sexy has shown up a lot in the first half of that work, in the community conversations, the community co-design events that we have the honor of participating in, co-hosting. And I think that makes a lot of sense based on recent events in Hawaii, but it has been true for a number of years. I think resilience and microgrids really echo what Mana Newton was speaking to about sovereignty, about getting to decide what happens in your community, about, I think we have also seen in recent times in Kona Lows that community is often the first to respond to their neighbors, and so they also know the most about what people do, what people need when events happen. And so I would say that resilience and microgrids shows up a lot in the first half of our work. However, the projects that we are actually able to support the development of, I would say most of the time they are not described as microgrids or really provide the resilience that folks are speaking to in the co-design process, because it's really tricky. And I think for a number of reasons it's really tricky, but I'm first going to talk about what assets the community brings to the resilience conversation. I think, first of all, a knowledge of place, a knowledge of where resources are and how resources change in different events, where water flows, when it's sunny, when it's cloudy, when it's windy, like the knowledge of place and where to locate generating assets within a microgrid to provide that resilience. Community knows best where that is. Sometimes that's augmented by a little bit of technical research, but I find that often the technical research validates what people in that place know rather than the other way around. And then what I spoke to before also about how communities work together and what happens in an event. People on the ground know that the best, and so they are really well positioned to be directing and designing microgrids or other resilient, sometimes we call them nanogrids, depending on what size they are, but generally resilient assets. And I think from a community perspective, you see a lot of the same challenges that I'm sure all of the panelists and all of you guys see in developing resilient assets, which is that data, understanding what loads are and what a 2-week duration storage asset actually looks like. Having access to data is everyone's challenge, but from a community perspective, I think I have seen that be one of the biggest obstacles in being able to design a microgrid, whether we're talking at a community scale, like a whole neighborhood, or one particular behind-the-meter community center. Data is hard for communities to access. And then I think what Ferdinand also spoke to about resilience kind of meaning extra dollars. It often means, not always, but it often means that that asset is going to cost more, and some folks have the ability to provide that that extra financial support for a behind-the-meter system, for example, because they see the value of when their business goes down if the larger grid goes out. But we don't have great ways of assigning value to that at a community scale. And so for us, especially in the current funding environment, it's often pretty challenging to make the case for investing extra money, and the incentives aren't always aligned. We've heard a lot of folks ask us about microgrids, and so we started to research the microgrid services tariff that was live a few years ago, and it was just really hard to make the financial case for that. And so then you gotta rely on philanthropic dollars to help fill that gap, and that's not a very sustainable way to build. So maybe I'll stop there, but I want to end on that communities really have a lot of knowledge in that, and so if we can help bring those resources of data and dollars, that will be a great way for us to pursue resilience.
Thanks, Allie. Russ, very interested to hear about Johnson Controls' work in this area.
Thank you, Rocky. And what a privilege to be here today and to be with the Hawaii Energy Conference. So gracious, and Hawaii's got a big part of my heart, no doubt about it. And I've been with Johnson Controls for probably 18 years, and 15 of those years been working with the state of Hawaii, and it's been just a privilege. And I'm here with some colleagues as well, Chuck Collins, Leif, Joe Caldwell, Dan Burris, Loan Okamoto. He would be here, but he's actually installing solar panels as we speak for the county of Maui for Mayor Bissam. And what we do as a developer within Johnson Controls, within the Sustainable Infrastructure Group, is we're a design builder. So we will design a project that includes resiliency, efficiency measures, solar, battery, lighting, meters, plug loads, geothermal, wind, whatever it is that we could possibly think about that can help create an impact in reducing utility usages. And then we put that through a procurement like energy savings performance contracting or a P3 agreement or a power purchase agreement, and then away we go, and then we guarantee the savings that the outcome is going to be there. And that helps transfer a lot of that risk from the customer. Nothing gets done without project economics, a procurement path, and a champion. I've never seen it get done. Even out here in Hawaii, where the business economics for projects just pencil by themselves with the cost of utilities, along with other states like California and Maine. But without a champion, you can't get them to go. And that's what's so important. I mean, the business economics can be there, the right technologies are there, the financing is there, but you don't have a champion. And I remember being at this conference about 8 years ago, and we had one of our champions sitting here with Mike Unamasabi at the University of Hawaii Community College, his vice chancellor, sitting up here, talking about the first net zero energy college in the country, right across the street, Maui College. First one in the country. And it was done through 2 phases of energy performance contracting, about $100 million worth of work. And collectively, Johnson Controls within the state of Hawaii, and all this work is competitively bid. We've done about $500 million worth of resiliency project work. We are saving the state $1 billion in utility savings that we guarantee. In the event that the savings aren't realized, we'll cut a check or we'll do something to minimize the efficiencies. I wanted to share a little story of, these economics change all the time. You're seeing them right now in the state of Hawaii with the Hawaii tax solar credit. You see it with the federal tax credit. So the economics are always changing. And what we do is when we start to put these projects together, we basically come up with a forecast of what the savings will be. The savings, the incentives, the project schedule, the permitting, and then we put that all into a cash flow model. And then, aside from crossing our fingers, do everything possible to protect that cash flow model. But some things are out of our control. And I want to share with you the same story that Mike Unamasabi shared on stage, that college in the University of Hawaii Community College Systems would have never hit net zero energy and had microgrid and resiliency capabilities without these procurements. So it was in the 11th hour, and you might remember this back during Trump's first term, which he was adding a bunch of tariffs to the solar panels. And those tariffs were going to completely wreck the cash flow. It was not going to get done. So it was a Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock, when that bell was going to hit, those tariffs were going to hit. It was going to wreck this cash flow model. We wouldn't have had the tax credit, so it wouldn't have worked. So Mike actually told his legal person that day, just put my name down. Mike guarantees this project. And of course, he couldn't do that, but his legal person's like, you really want me to put that down? I can't put that down. That's what a champion looks like. He was able to convince the lawyer that everything's going to be okay, but we had to get the contract signed. And where was the president of the university? He was at the top of Haleakala, doing a research study. So we ended up having to go with Mike and take a flight up to Haleakala to get this thing signed before 4 o'clock. And that's what champion looks like to me. And we've got multiple champions here on island. Mayor Bissum and Mayor Victorino before him with the County of Maui projects, Alan Lee over at the City and County of Honolulu, Ford Fujigami over at the Hawaii Department of Transportation, Governor Ige when he was in office, and now Governor Green. These are all fantastic champions. What we try to do is just get the incentives and the cash flow looking the best we can, and sometimes we got to maneuver. And those maneuvers look like permitting's taking too long. How many people have heard of that? So we might say, hey, this solar's going online by December, but permitting might delay it 5-6 months. The internet connection agreement might be longer. So now that impacts the cash flow. And we're trying to predict all of those things in order to make sure that this project is going to pay for itself and not have any risk to taxpayers or student tuition dollars at all to the project, and so that all the savings will be guaranteed. So that's what we look like in a project. Nothing gets done without the economics, the procurement path, and a champion.
Thanks, Russ. Some wisdom there, for sure. Appreciate it. And what I love about those projects is they go directly to taxpayer savings. Andrew, you have a more specific angle on this question. What can you tell us about your work?
Yeah, thanks, Rocky, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's sometimes funny to me to think that I'm at an energy conference because I'm probably the least likely person that I thought would be on this stage. I'm kind of new to the microgrid development space. Not an engineer. Ask my friend from Puerto Rico if you have any electrical questions. But I came into this from a little bit of a unique way, and I'll just tell that story real quickly. So I worked for 20 years as a first responder for international healthcare organization. And so I'd be the one, parachuting in with medicine and medical supplies when something happened around the world. And I kept seeing the same thing time and time and time again. I saw loss of life due to power loss. So to go back to just over 20 years ago, in New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, bringing medicines to hospitals and to the Superdome. 82 people died at the Jackson Memorial Hospital because the generator flooded. They no longer put generators on the ground floor of hospitals since then, but that was a power issue. It wasn't the hurricane itself. 5 years later, I was in Haiti for 2 years after the earthquake in 2010. Largest loss of life in an instant in modern history, but the aftermath of that is the people that did survive. I kept seeing doctors performing surgeries on people and kids in the dark with flashlights, no power for the equipment. Hurricane Sandy 3 years later, 40% of generators failed. People died because of the cold. And then, I'm skipping over a bunch in between, but then 2017 in Puerto Rico, I was there. I was one of the first people in on a boat, actually, because the airport was closed. And I was bringing insulin in cooler boxes around the island because Puerto Rico has a very high rate of diabetes, and if you don't have your insulin, you'll die, and the insulin has to keep cold. So I was driving around the island for months, and pitch blackness, total darkness. And I would bring it to these medical facilities, and they'd say, "Thank you, Andrew, for the insulin, but we can't do anything with it. We don't have any power." And the weird story that's like a name-droppy story, and I don't know how to make it not a name-droppy story, so apologies in advance. But on one of the trips I was there, President Clinton was down. He was doing a lot of work with Puerto Rico at the time, and I was touring one of these facilities with him. It was hot, it was dark, it was, dank, and he said, "Andrew, you know what, you guys should really put solar batteries on these health centers." And I said, "That's a good idea, Mr. President, that's not what we do. We bring medicine." And he said, "Well, they can't use your medicine, you should do this instead." And I never thought I'd be in the position, but it's hard to say no to a former president. And so we did. I built 16 microgrids in Puerto Rico in 2018, 2019 for health centers, and then 20 for non-process communities, which are communities in Puerto Rico that aren't tied to the municipal water system, so they rely on well waters and pumps, and without power, the pumps don't work. I thought that was going to be it. I thought I was done. I learned, and then I came home to California where I live, evacuated my home with my kids for a fire. We were out of our home for a month, no power, and it just kind of right then it was like, this isn't a Haiti issue, it's not a Puerto Rico issue, it's not a New Orleans issue, this is an issue that faces rich countries, rich states, poor states, and there is a solution. We can build resilience in critical community-serving facilities where people who are vulnerable are going to go when they need cooling, when they need heating, when they need power, when they need medicine. We know where these people are, we know where they're going to go, and we have the technology to build that resilience, that behind-the-meter solar and storage. And so I started our company on Earth Day 2021 to build resilience for critical community serving facilities across the country. And really happy to be, my colleague Cindy Count is in the audience, and we have 10 projects here across the islands in Hawaii. I'll finish by saying, you know, fires in California, Lahaina fire in 2023, the Kona lows in 2026. One of our projects is in Hana with the Hana Community Health Center. They were operating in the dark with flashlights on patients after the Kona lows, just like in Haiti. This is a universal issue, and we know how to solve it. I think our challenge, my challenge that I've learned is, as my colleague from Puerto Rico mentioned, is how are you going to pay for it? And when it maybe comes back to me, I can talk a little bit about how we're actually getting these projects built, because I thought I was going to do something simple. We're just going to put solar and batteries on these buildings, and I've had to learn about tax equity and tax credits and state rebates, and that's the hard part. But the core reason to do it is right and good, and it's needed, and we know how, and we know where. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Andrew. Powerful testimony there. We'll go to some questions now. And if in the audience, if you guys have questions, please put them in the app. We're going to start looking at those pretty soon here. Ferdinand, Puerto Rico has been living this resilience challenge longer and harder than almost anyone. Based on what you've seen, do you think island grids like Hawaii's are moving fast enough? And what's one policy lever that would change the pace? Or two, if you want to add.
Well, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. I wouldn't know what a reasonable rate would be. I wouldn't even know how we would measure that. I must tell you, yesterday I went to Kihei, and you know, energy, enthusiast like I am, or I looked at all the roofs, and there's a lot of roofs that are lacking solar here in Maui. I think that we should encourage the installation of solar in every roof and batteries, but it can't be at the expense of other ratepayers or the grid, which is part of the issues that we have in Puerto Rico. We have to find new and better ways to integrate behind-the-meter solar and batteries, making them work for the benefit of the entire grid. The same with the RPS. I don't think we should necessarily, that renewables at a utility scale should be necessarily forced. As long as renewable energy, solar or wind and batteries are cheaper than fossil fuels, there's going to be an organic weaning off of fuels. And we're seeing that in Puerto Rico right now. Although we also have some new fossil projects going in, or in the bid process. It should never be at the expense of other ratepayers. Essentially, that's, as a regulator, it's always what I'm looking at. I know Hawaii has already moved away from one-to-one net metering, although I don't agree entirely with the no export policy. That's something that in Puerto Rico has to change. Unfortunately, or fortunately for some in Puerto Rico, the net metering policy is untouchable statutorily, so we can't modify any part of the net metering policy up to 2030, or past before 2030, I must say. So that essentially, we have to look for new ways to use these assets that are going to contribute to the functionality of the entire grid. That's what we need to do.
Thanks, Ferdinand. And Puerto Rico has a leading VPP program that is doing that, going for that.
Yeah, Puerto Rico, like I said before, 190,000 systems, 1.5 gigawatts of generation capacity. The data on how much batteries we have is not as clear as the actual generation capacity, but it's in the hundreds of megawatts. So right now we have the CBES program. Actually, my colleague Antonio Torres was here last year, and he talked about the CBES program. It's been online for a couple years now, and we've had dispatches of around 70 megawatts of energy going into the grid from distributed batteries. But I must say, it's only an emergency program right now, and people are getting paid, or aggregators, I must say, they're being paid $1.25 a kWh. So it is working. It is preventing blackouts in Puerto Rico. So the way it works is a day ahead, if Luma, the operator, sees that the reserves are going to be low during the peak hours, they plan the dispatch. And essentially, it just, once the reserves are low, they get dispatched, and that's the way that we prevent the blackouts. But it's not a sustainable. I shouldn't say sustainable. It can't be a daily use of those batteries at that rate.
Right. So I'm going to jump to an audience question right away for Ali. And it just moved. Oh, there we go. Ali, how can Shake's community-driven energy project planning and development model be replicated and or scaled across the Paena?
Ooh, I love that question. Call me later. I think, let's see. I guess in my experience, when there are, first of all, we're already working with a handful of communities across Oahu and Maui and Molokai, a little bit Big Island, and a combination, usually that conversation starts because a community group or an individual, a champion within that community, is interested in starting this conversation. And I would say, actually, on the whole, it's usually in response to a negative energy infrastructure sentiment, like a project that was proposed in our community, we didn't like it, we got geared up, we educated ourselves about that project, and now we're hungry to design something that we do like and that does meet our needs. And so I think that is, I'm not proposing that that's how we replicate people's interest in engaging in that conversation, but I do think understanding people's motivations for getting into the energy conversation is important, because it is kind of boring, and sometimes we just want engineers to figure it out. But as I mentioned before, folks within the community have a lot of knowledge that engineers in labs and offices don't have. So how to replicate it, I think, for sure, I have found that an intermediary, like a group that's willing to hold the balance between what community has to say and wants to know, and connecting them with the data and the financial resources to act on that is super important, and that can look really different. Sometimes that's a community-based nonprofit, sometimes that's part of a county or state government, but somebody who is resourced, community-based organizations cannot do this just out of their own goodwill. They need grant funding, they need consistent grant funding to be able to engage in that conversation and be a partner. Yeah, and then I think just connecting folks to what brings them into energy. I think often it's affordability, but more recently it is also seeing what happens to our larger grid when floods and fires and wind events happen, and how our grid responds to that and how we could possibly change that. I don't think that was a silver bullet, but those are my thoughts.
Thanks for audibling with me on that one, Allie. Russ, you've built microgrids in a lot of different markets and policy environments. What's the version of this that actually scales, that actually works? What has to be true policy-wise or financially to go even faster?
Yeah, great question, Rocky. And what I can tell you is that policy, a lot of the times, has a negative impact on the incentives and the project economics of resiliency. It's like the opposite. Policy is a great North Star. You know, we're going that way. But if it's not coupled with procurement and incentives, it actually delays the implementation of that policy. And I could give you a few examples of that. And I did my dissertation on pre-COVID, energy policy alternatives for a resilient future. And it was a Delphi study, so I was surveying experts in the industry from the Utilities Council to the state, you know, a laundry list of folks to survey to find out which energy policy alternatives are good, which ones are likely to happen, and which ones are the most important. Now, there's all sorts of good ideas about policy, which could be a certain technology, lighting technology is policy, or a certain greenhouse gas reduction level is policy, or a certain level of efficiency in HVAC is policy. But what happens is that once it starts to become policy, the incentives from the utilities or the Energy Commission's office or wherever, they start to dry up because incentives are really in place to go above and beyond policy. And so we run into these things all the time. Like in California, when the lighting code changed, all the lighting rebates went away. And then RPS standards started to rise and all the solar incentives started to go away. So that has a direct negative impact on project economics. So if the policy doesn't have clear delineation of here's the policy, but here's how we're going to get here and support the community, it's almost a delayed type of implementation policy. Another policy that ends up being a real drag on our projects is net meter energy policy. I mean, and when I go back over to Maui College, some lessons learned, you know, we were counting on savings. We were counting on demand response savings. We were counting on utility savings. We were even kind of counting on the utility taking back some of the solar. If you look across the parking lot, you'll see carport solar all across the parking lot. The batteries are on campus. We got full efficiency with controls. So that is a resilient microgrid campus. Well, the solar was financed through a power purchase agreement. And so at times the college had to pay curtailment because they're overproducing. And if you don't use it, you're losing it because the utility is not willing to buy it back. And that's a big problem on economics. So to get better policy around net meter energy, where there's a better shared in the revenue per cost per kilowatt hour, that's how we're going to advance projects a lot faster. And I can tell you, you know, in California, they give us like 5 cents a kilowatt hour back with your solar that you don't use, but we're paying 45 cents, you know, on the other end. So that is not a good deal for anyone. So that's what I always encourage when we look at policy, that when we're shaping it, it's all good intention, but if you don't know the implementation part, the practicality of it, we need to redraw that policy. And I can tell you, there's some things at stake in the state of Hawaii right now with the state Hawaii energy tax credit. That going away, that severely hurts solar projects. That's going to hurt the economic impact of all those projects and all those jobs created. So we've got to be able to figure out how to turn that around. Another important one right now is the wheeling bill for solar. You know, if that's on the governor's desk, and if he vetoes this, that's a big miss. Because if you don't have the ability to wheel, because we only have so many things we can do behind the meter, right? We're kind of held hostage. We can only do so much. You only have so much land that you could put solar, batteries, or geothermal. You only have so much. And if you can't leverage other parts of land and combine and collectively say you could produce solar and not be limited to 1 meter, then that's a problem. So that wheeling bill has got to be protected because it's going to have a huge economic impact throughout the whole state of Hawaii. And definitely encourage everybody here to support both that Hawaii solar tax credit and the wheeling bill because it's going to create a lot of jobs. It's going to create a lot of savings, a lot of resiliency within the state, and once again, have Hawaii be the model. I did want to share one more resiliency story, and it is about Maui College. And I mentioned it's a net zero energy campus, and we're really proud of it. And, you know, back when the Lahaina fires happened, and I get a little chills, you know, chicken skin when I talk about this story, is, you know, that fires happen, you know, we're all devastated, and you don't know what's happening, right? And the news is only sharing so much. And I remember one night, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting a text message. I'm like, who's texting me right now? It's Chancellor Louie over at Maui College. He's like, Russ, how do I take the thermostat and have it go 24 hours? Because we need to open up this kitchen because we become a first respondent center for the Lahaina fires because we're able to stay on because of our power, on-site power generation. Had we not had that project, and we weren't even thinking about that at the time, to be resilient in the face of a power blackout because of the fires, we were thinking other things, right? So, you know, I responded back like, oh, you need to turn the thermostat on? Like, here's a chancellor like there at the campus trying to keep the kitchen on for all the first responders. So naturally, I found somebody smarter than I who knows actually program a stat to get out there and help Chancellor Louie. But that's the type of relationship, a partnership that we have, and very grateful that Louie was able to keep the lights on for first responders. And so he's a champion, along with Mayor Bissam here with the County of Maui, doubling down on adding extra solar panels and efficiency measures to increase the resiliency as a great response from the Lahaina fires.
Thanks. Thanks, Russ. Andrew, hospitals and health centers are the places communities run to when everything else fails. What would it mean for community resilience if every critical facility had reliable backup power? And what's standing between here and there?
Yeah, great question. So I think, I guess one thing I'd say is that one thing we've been able to make the case pretty well on is, you know, everything is bipartisan these days and political, but like, you have to be kind of a weirdo to argue that like a resilient community medical center is important and is a good thing. Like I said earlier, we know the community buildings where people might go if they need care, if they lose power in their home. And so we've won some, you know, we won a Department of Energy award to build 125 of these for community health centers in the rural Southeast over the next 7 years. That one is still ongoing. We won and lost a $195 million award to do it, and same thing in Puerto Rico for dialysis centers and CDTs, and we just won an award to do it along the Gulf Coast and the states that are most impacted by hurricanes along the Gulf. The model that I look to and love the most out of New Orleans is called the Community Lighthouse Initiative, and they're just focused on New Orleans. They're community organizers, and their goal is to build 100 what they call community lighthouses in New Orleans so that no one in the city is more than a 15-minute walk away from a building that has reliable power and hardened infrastructure. And so it's church, it's houses of worship, medical centers, schools, whatever the building is, it's close enough to where people are gonna go to need care if they need it, if they lose power in their home. I mean, heat kills more people in our country than everything else put together. a lot of people die when they lose power at home and they need cooling. So for me, it looks like we know the zip codes of our country that are the most vulnerable. We know where people are going to go for care. It's identifying those sites, making them resilient. Like I said, we're doing it in the Gulf Coast, we're doing it in the rural Southeast. And when we were looking at, you know, when I was hoping to do this work in Hawaii, you know, kind of cautiously and respectfully, because I live in California, but we got the support of the Community Health Center Association here in Hawaii. They were in from the start. They kind of realized very quickly the need for their health centers, who treat the most vulnerable people in Hawaii, to stay powered when the power goes out. We got the support of the health centers themselves and the CEOs, and then I want to give a shout out to Michael Colon and Greg from the Ulupono Initiative. They believed in the idea, and they sort of gave us the confidence to kind of keep it going. Put together a cohort of 10 projects across all the islands, and then just 2 weeks ago got the support to fund them with the green fee in Hawaii and with the GIA, so now we can build them. So it's been a long road, but we've kind of been like going inch by inch, and you know, based on the buy-in of the people who you know, run these places and go to these places. It's not me telling anyone what they should do.
Thank you. We'll go to a couple audience questions now. Here's one. The New York Times announced recently that Cuba is out of oil. Is Puerto Rico facing a similar looming crisis? Is Hawaii, for that matter? And what is the plan, given the grid's continued reliance on fossil fuels?
No, Puerto Rico is not running out of fuel, thank God. Unfortunately, we still rely majorly in fuel in mostly natural gas and bunker C, which is the dirtiest fuel you could imagine. It's essentially sludge. Luckily, it's cheaper, and most of the fossil fuel generators in Puerto Rico, the really old ones, run on bunker C. We have had several conversions to gas, and luckily that the gas prices have been relatively stable throughout this crisis. Yeah, but like I said, we're integrating hundreds of megawatts of solar in the next couple of years. We have a lot of batteries going online that will help. At first, we might, or we will. I'm sure that's what Luma will do as an operator. We're going to have to charge batteries with fossil fuels, unfortunately, at the beginning. But it's part of the transition. You know, that's what's going to happen. Eventually, we'll have enough solar that we're not going to need to charge the batteries with fossils, and we're going to have reliable generators that could cycle up and down, that's what's killing us right now. The bunker C generators, although they're relatively cheap, they don't have the ability to ramp up and down. So we're operating them super inefficiently during the day. They're just burning fuel and not producing power. No.
Thank you. So how are you approaching, this is, I guess, to more the developer side of things, how are you approaching funding for your projects with the rollback of the federal incentives and tax credits for renewables?
I can take a stab at that. Yeah, I mean, without funding, there's no project. Could anybody use some funding for the resiliency projects right now, or some financing? I mean, the financing and the funding is how you get the projects to go. So we prove that there's a a business case for a resiliency project to get done. Now we got to source finance. And we're agnostic to the type of financing that needs to happen. I mean, you want to look at the best cost of financing. And in the public sector, I mean, a lease is typically your cheapest cost of financing. So we use a tax-exempt lease purchase to finance these projects. Low cost of public financing, gives us a good rate. It's more savings back that go back to building a bigger project. So a TELP is very popular. We also will use general obligation bonds if necessary. We can use power purchase agreements that I mentioned that could finance solar and battery, where you don't have ownership of the asset, but you got a nice guaranteed kWh that you're paying that's clean, and that helps not shoulder the load of additional debt for the project. We also will self-finance the projects. We will self-finance every dollar of it and not ask for $1 from the customer. We'll self-finance the design, the build, the construction, the commissioning, and the measurement and verification, and we'll use our equity partners or self-financing partners for that. And that type of financing, a little bit higher of an interest rate, but if the project doesn't pencil every year, the customer doesn't pay. So it's a contingent payment type of financing. So we end up looking at sourcing the best type of financing for any of these projects. Anybody who wants to give us a term sheet, to fund the project, the best rate, the best term, and by the way, you need term to get these projects to pencil. A 5-year term is not going to do it. You need 15, 20, 30, sometimes 50-year terms to get some of these projects to go. I know we deconstructed a coal fire plant for the University of North Dakota, right down to the ground, and rebuilt them a natural gas steam boiler plant using a P3 agreement. They didn't have any money for it, so we had to use a 50-year term, but by using that term, now the project is cash flow neutral. So we looked at sourcing the best financing all the time, take it to different banks. That's all in the public sector. The private sector, though, it's a little bit different. There are leasing options out there for the private sector. They're not too popular, but there is a popular commercial financing mechanism called PACE financing, Property Assessed Clean Energy, where you can use a property assessment. It could be third-party finance, and then that debt is paid back on the property tax bill annually for 15 to 20 years. It's a great application for the commercial side of things to be able to get a financing without necessarily getting a full-term debt obligation. So I think what you want to do when you're doing these projects is not think that there's one type of financing for this. We try to look at all the options, put them in the cash flow, best cash flow wins.
Great, thank you.
I would just add, I agree with all that, and we've tried to kind of sell the idea, sell funders, whether it's governments or philanthropy, on the idea of why these projects are important and what they're going to mean to the people and the communities that are impacting them. I think somehow, I think if I could be so bold and say the industry has sort of lost its way on how are we pitching these projects, and I think we got to go back to why is this important? Why are renewables the future? And how are the people going to benefit from these projects?
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left here. In these last 4 minutes, could each of you in about a minute, and Ali, we'll start with you, in about a minute, what is the one most important policy, program, thing that we can do to achieve our critical resilience goals and maintain affordability and, keep the lights on?
Okay, hard question, but I'm going to go with my gut on what came to mind first, which is that I think community scale microgrids are a really tough nut to crack, and also I would say it's what I hear most often when we ask community about what their resilient grid future looks like. And I understand from a technical and financial side that increase our costs because we are making smaller areas more resilient, and also I think it kind of aligns with what a lot of us intuitively think about when we think about coming together and supporting the people that live around us and being able to make our own decisions. And so I think I would really love to see more enabling policy around community scale decision making and community scale control.
Ferdinand.
I think we have to strategically invest in grid assets and upgrades that would allow for further integration of renewables into the grid, while also making it more resilient, to resist, in our case, mostly hurricanes, but we've seen so many different types of catastrophes recently. And we must also invest in technologies like DERMS and demand response, things that are going to give visibility and control to the behind-the-meter assets. The grid of the not-so-distant future is going to be dynamic. We're going to be able to control the load and be able to control those batteries behind the meter at every single part of the day. It's a matter of time and money, and there has to be a balance between the costs and the benefits. But we have to, at the same time, we have to try to protect the most vulnerable people. Me as a regulator, the way that we can do that is through innovative or intelligent rate design. We have to protect the people that need the protection.
Thank you. Russ.
Well, you got a lot of great policy out there. You got, here in the state of Hawaii, you got the net zero energy decarbonization policy by 2045 for the states, 2035. In California, you got the Assembly Bill 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act that Schwarzenegger signed into law over a decade ago. And you got similar policy in New York. So you have states establishing some really good policy. I think from there, it's figuring out the policy that helps us get to those goals. It's going to sound a little biased too, by the way, but it's not quite a bias because we know the path to be able to kind of get to results. I think more favorable policy around the shared value of a kilowatt hour. If it's generated on site, behind the meter, why is it less of a cost to the utility versus the utility purchasing it from a gas-fired power plant? Why is that? So I think we need a better cost and value for KWH so that we can all share in the benefit of creating energy because it creates resiliency for all of us. That coupled with help unlock more procurements like energy savings performance contracts or P3 agreements that allow for longer terms that get some of these projects unlocked and unstuck.
Thanks. Andrew, you have the last word.
I don't know if I have the best answer, but and so I would say, I don't know if I'm a fan of mandates, but I'm going to say it anyway. In California, we have what's called Title 24, which is all new construction, residential and commercial, now by statute, must be installed with solar plus storage. Every new building that's built in California. So it kind of takes away the questioning of, should I do this? Is it right? How much does it cost? How am I going to pay for it? It's like, you just have to do it. It's part of your project cost. You know that now. It's built in. We see it with renovations in Massachusetts. There's building emission stuff. So once it becomes something, it's like you have to do it, then it removes the, are there tax credits for it or not? It's like, it's there. It's law. It's time to do it.
So with that, thank you so much for this panel conversation. I learned something from this. So thank you. That's our panel.